Dream big. Dream big. Visualize it. Imagine all the building blocks of stepping stones that would be problems and like barriers to getting to it. And then just knock them down one by one by one. And the next thing you know, your dream's a reality.
Welcome to this week's As Unexpected podcast, when we talk to C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists about how they lead into the future when the future generally goes as unexpected. I'm Scott Marshall, your host, and my own professional experience has made me a believer that it's not how you show up when all goes as planned, but it is how you show up when things go as unplanned. Given all of their experiences, each of our guests has become very attuned to the fact that the future is not to be predicted. My hope is that this podcast can help all of you become better leaders by building the core leadership capabilities for leading in an uncertain world.
Hey, welcome everybody again to the As Unexpected podcast. I am thrilled to be here with my guest today. Eric Harrison and I had a chance to have breakfast just about a month ago, and we found so much in common. We both spent time in Japan. We both played basketball in Japan. But one big difference is Eric is still fluent in Japanese, and I can barely say 5 words anymore. But with that, I'd love, Eric, welcome, and can you do an introduction to the audience of your professional background and your current work?
Sure, Scott, and thank you very much. Herisu desu. Hajimemashite, dozo yoroshiku. That's about my Japanese. Let me just tell you, fluent is a little overstated. I speak like a perfect 5-year-old idiot. Listen, I humbly know when somebody's truly fluent, it's when they can do simultaneous translation. I'm not quite there. Let me go back and give you a little introduction. Born and raised in Golden, Colorado, famous for only one thing, which is the home of Coors beer. I grew up right next to the plant, and 80% of the graduating class of Golden High School went to the factory, and most never left. And they had this beautiful hiring program where if you joined out of high school, they would let you buy 2 cases, not 6-packs, but cases of beer for life, $3 per case per month. And you could buy 2 cases a month. And unfortunately, that was a very good recruiting tool for everybody except me because I didn't like beer. But that gives you the backstory. I went to Boulder, studied finance accounting. My seminal event was semester at C. We'll probably talk more about that, so we'll skip that for the moment. I graduated and immediately moved to Japan, not knowing anything, including Japanese, and stumbled around and managed to play basketball and coincidentally work in a company. And the company I worked at was Ricoh, and they make office automation equipment, watches, so forth, cameras. And I got stuck in the merger and acquisition department, and that actually was the seminal event of my life. So I'll connect it to semester at sea because that's what brought me to Japan as opposed to any other country in the world. And then once I'm at this company, I said, wow, it's pretty cool how one company can buy another company. And I said, I kind of like that, but I kind of wish it were maybe smaller because these are big companies buying big companies and, maybe a little bit too slow moving. So when I came back to America, I went to work for Hewlett-Packard, did the same thing, and then went back to business school at UCLA, got out and became a venture capitalist, did that for a bunch of years, became a partner at a firm called Crosspoint. They sort of were at the top of their game in March of 2000, and the managing partner called the tech rec and basically said, we're going to go ahead and wind up shop, give back a $1.8 billion fund, and I'm kind of out of a job looking for something new to do. And that led me to found a private equity firm. And it was right at the time of the tech wreck. So we had to figure out, well, what do you do with all these broken buildings that used to house data centers, but they've been left for dead? And we bought them at 8 cents on the dollar. We wrapped them. We spent a year mapping the carrier network, figured out which buildings in America matter. There are 27, it turns out. We bought 25 of them. We took it public in the New York Stock Exchange. It's called Digital Relative Trust, very powerful company now. And that sort of was the beginning of my career in private equity. And then I got a call one day from the people that manage my money, and they said, we're starting a new company. We're going to leave Merrill Lynch, and we'd like you to be our CEO. And I said, I don't know anything about wealth management. That's why I hire you. And that led to me joining and being an operating guy for the first time in my life, starting as CEO. and that was our prior company. Grew it, sold it, lifted out of First Republic, thankfully, before they went the way of the dinosaur. And now we've started a new company, and that's 6 years into its journey. I love it.
That's a great background. There's so many things in there for us to explore in the next 20, 25 minutes, Eric. Thanks for that introduction. Let's start going back to your time in Japan. You told me about your effort to actually launch a business in Japan, and I found that to be a great risk taker with some unexpected outcomes. Yeah. Would you mind sharing with our audience a bit about what led you there, what you tried to do, what happened, and how you sort of were resilient out of that and kept moving along?
Wow. It's also a moment in failure. To be honest, I had spent a couple of years in Japan doing the basketball and the work situation, left Japan, went to business school, and then right out of business school, I really felt there was a hole in the Japanese market for non-Japanese firms that wanted to sell software in Japan. And so when I was at Ricoh, I got approached all the time by American companies that would say, we'd love to distribute, software in Japan, but it's tricky, and you're an American, we speak the same language. Could you work with us? And unfortunately, as an employee, I wasn't able to do that. But I saw the opportunity. So when I moved back to Japan, this was 1992, I thought there was real opportunity. Unfortunately, if you know 1992, there's a word endaka, and it meant strong yen. And this was a moment when the whole real estate world crashed in Japan. And, for a year, I kind of bent my sword trying to, get clients to work with me on software, but the whole economy was imploding. And so I gave it a shot for about 14 months. And they said, at some point, you need to know when to cut your losses and go back with your tail between your legs and figure out something new to do and figure out how to pay for your MBA. And so I learned a lot, but I also learned, some of the best parts of valor is knowing when to quit and actually change directions and pivot.
Yeah. There's a Kenny Rogers song about that, I think, know when to hold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. So, yeah, probably released somewhere around that time. And, 92, I think I shared with you, I was living in Japan, 91. So we kind of overlapped there, but I was teaching English. You were off trying to start your own business. But great lessons from there. And then, you just kept pursuing it. You kept working and kept learning and kept taking chances. Again, this podcast is about the as unexpected, whether good or bad. So it seems like you had a lot of good unexpected as well. But can you share some of that story with our audience about, you had the right intentions, you had a plan, but things didn't go as expected. Whether again it came out more positive than you thought or not.
Sure. So I had this great, sort of experience in Japan. And this is pre-business school, so it's after basketball and after Ricoh. I came back and I went looking so I was from Colorado, and my dad had said, all boats rise in a rising tide. And he had a really important lesson here, which is I was looking for a job and I didn't know what to do. And, I was 2 years out of undergrad. And, I knew I wanted to be something in finance, but it was not very well formed. And his view was, start with what industries are really burgeoning and really taking off. And they're going to have more job opportunities. And I'd say that's the number one life lesson that I could share with anybody is if you don't know what you're going to do and you don't know what you want to do and all things are more or less equal, start with the things that kind of feel like they're important to you. So I had come from a little tiny place in Golden, Colorado, and actually Lookout Mountain, which is sort of just up the mountain from Golden. But the point is, I didn't want to go back there. I didn't know a soul in California. So I come out to California. I remember distinctly hooking up my limited possessions in the back of my Honda Civic, towing it out to California. I get there, and honestly, nobody could understand what I did in Japan, and it sort of didn't translate. And so I didn't have a network, and no one really kind of gave you much credit for that. And I finally had to go to the library at Stanford and just look at these tech directories. And I started dialing for dollars. And I called first at the HR level. No one ever returned a call. And then at the general manager level, of every division of every major tech company in California. And I spent 4 months doing this before getting the job. So what I will tell you is tenacity is my first lesson I would like to share. And the second is play for the dream. I didn't want to settle. I had all kinds of opportunities to settle along the way and not get into tech, M&A, something like that. I could have, I don't know, gone to work at some basic company, never heard of, doing something else. But I said, it's important enough. I want to keep playing for the prize. And I think it was valuable because getting that job at Hewlett Packard, first of all, big name, Hewlett Packard, and M&A, is the right field. And it transitioned me. And I'd never worked with anybody that had an MBA. I hadn't had as aspirations for an MBA. And everybody in my group had an MBA. And they said, well, you really can't work here longer than 2 years without going and getting an MBA. So again, it pushed me in life to probably play above my natural talent level. And I'd say that's another kind of life lesson. Work with smart people, obviously figure out what mattered. I wanted to be in California. I wanted to be in M&A. I wanted to be in technology because that's all boats are rising in tech. And it kind of felt like a starting place that I could really make a beachhead and take off.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in all of that for sure. But I'd like to jump to your current operation, which, again, you'd had success, and this was the next big step, high wealth individual, managing their money. You had all the success in the past. Why do this next step? Why go? I mean, your tenacity and your drive is got to be fairly unique. You weren't done yet. So what led you to this next big venture, IEQ?
I'm going to guess it's magnets. And what I mean by that is, from birth, I'm a fairly outward, extroverted personality. I like people. I'm a relationship-based networker. And I have a feeling that I didn't even know about wealth management as a field. And, venture is fairly analytical, and it's all about where's the world going 6 months over the horizon. Private equity is all about financial structuring, and it's much more, I will call it Excel and spreadsheet based. And they were fine for me, but I think they honestly weren't the best fits for my personality. And when I just magically got this call to come in and be the CEO of a wealth management firm, I didn't quite appreciate how much that was actually my natural fit. So the other thing I would tell everybody here is don't fight the tide. When you're in high school and you struggle in math and you're good at something else, don't go into a job that requires math. It's a pretty basic concept. But my point is, my current job is really all about making trust-based relationships in the first 60 seconds. And it turned out I didn't know it, but that happens to be my natural gift. All the other stuff is kind of like, okay, not that great. But I can create trust-based relationships really quickly because I really care about the other person. They feel like they're being heard. And we relate on some level very quickly. And it just turns out I like people. And that's most of wealth management. The basics of asset allocation isn't actually that complicated, especially once you've set a firm and a framework and models. Really it's about meeting people, kind of sharing their story, hearing what they're struggling with, and hopefully being their solution. But that's how it changed.
Yeah. Could I push a little bit on that? Because you had built a core skill set in understanding a spreadsheet. It may not have been your natural gift, but you build that trust because you also understand that. Isn't that correct?
Fair enough. Credibility matters and knowledge matters. So I think you can sound like a used car salesman no disrespect to used car salesmen, but you can sound like a used car salesman if you don't know your product. So it actually is probably the most important moment of what if I were going to share. You really need to do well in this business, and I would argue any business, and that's having curiosity around your domain.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program for college students and adults on career breaks, sabbaticals, or retired, interested in learning and exploring the world together. Learn more about the Lifelong Learner program at www.semesteratSea.org.
Love it. Love that curiosity framework for sure. I was in the middle of a book by Ben Graves, who's famous in Hollywood, done a bunch of movies, Apollo 13 and so on. And he writes about how it's all been about curiosity for him, his entire career. And how do we just keep the hunger? So you talked about tenacity. You talked about credibility. You talked about identifying and embracing your core gift. I mean, those are such important pieces. And, the younger audience for sure needs to understand, boy, if you are not tenacious, no matter what you're pursuing, you're just not going to get ahead, right? I mean, you've had that.
I think that you can get lucky or you can be born with wealth, but honestly, I think there's something to be said for trying to align with your passions. I hire 50 people a year at my company. We do a summer intern program, so I work with hiring a lot of young people. And so, I think I have a good sense as to what this generation is made of and how they present when they come into an interview. And it is different than I think how I felt I had to present. I had to show up and explain the rationale for why that company. And I think very few people today that I've interviewed are really at the level of having, they know wealth management, they know the competition, they know what IEQ is all about, and they have figured out why would IEQ be the best fit for them before they walk into their first interview. And if they actually did that, they get hired on the spot. The GPA is irrelevant if they actually had that presentation style. So there's a lot there, I think, that I would unpack. But what I would say is it's probably saying it's more than just having a passion. Passion is like a hobby. It's having intentionality around how you think about your career and your steps of evolution as you kind of progress through life and you get a little bit more confident.
Yeah, I love it. So what do you say in that, let's call it a 30-year journey so far, maybe?
Boy, I hate to tell you, dude, it's 41 years post-college. I mean, 41 years post-high school, excuse me.
Okay. Well, you're a very young man. And what would you say was the most unexpected turn in that journey? What just like, you had no idea this was coming and it happened?
I'm not making this up and I'm not pandering to my audience here. It was semester at sea. And the reason it was semester at sea is that I am an insular kid in Golden, Colorado. I'd never been outside America. And I go on semester at sea and the first port of call is Kobe, Japan. I have never been anywhere in my life. And I saw this place that was really foreign for my perspective. And it made me change from thinking I was going to be a finance accounting major and go to work for one of what was the big 8 accounting firms, now big 4, to instead saying, skip even looking for a job in this country. That place is pretty cool. I'm going to move to Japan and figure it out.
Yeah. And then my guess is suddenly you recognize that underlying curiosity in you and you've never lost it. Like this is going to feed you all the way along.
Oh, honestly, every day is a journey. You learn, you grow. My sort of hero in life is Tony Robbins. I actually built a gym in my house that was sort of reflecting this manifestation of you take your passion, which for me was working out in a gym, and saying, well, what would make it better? And I said, if I could work out with a bunch of other people. And so I said, well, geez, I bought a house and it had a big orange grove pasture in the front. I said, why don't we just move all those orange trees away and build a big gym and then invite everybody to come for free? And that was about 5 years ago. And it is a one-of-a-kind gym on the West Coast. And it's there for everybody. It's just it's like a community center. And to me, that's an example. If you have the manifestation of, Tony would start by saying, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably not going to get there. If you don't have a dream, you're probably not going to get there. If you're dreaming what you think is inside of your scope of accomplishment, you're probably going to have a pretty small accomplishment. Dream big, visualize it. Imagine all the building blocks of stepping stones that would be problems and like barriers to getting to it. And then just knock them down one by one by one. And the next thing you know, your dream's a reality. And it really works. It works.
Yeah, I love that. That just goes to my heart and my head, both, because I fundamentally believe that's how organizations should operate and individuals should operate. Yeah. Throw away these templated strategic plans, throw away the basic SWOT analysis and think, where do we aspire to be?
Yeah.
Where do we aspire? It should be audacious.
It should be. And it could be anything. It could be a community event. It could be a passion for work. It could be, a wealth zip code, and you got to figure out, well, how would I get to be a millionaire? How would I get to be something else? It could be anything. But the point is, once you figure out sort of what you want, you got a lot better chance of getting there. Matter of fact, my dad also used to tell me something else that I found very humorous. He said, Eric, it's easier to ride a horse in the direction he's going. And I said, Dad, what are you talking about? And his point was, if you fight the tide of either your personality, let's say I wanted to be a quiet person that was introspective and maybe an accountant or working as an actuary in a life insurance company, it's a bad fit for me as a human. That's not the horse going in the direction he's going. That's riding the horse in the wrong way. So start with, you've got this core DNA that has shaped you for whatever reason to have some gifts that lead you one direction. Ride the horse that way, and then figure out, well, what are all the things that a horse might discover if they keep riding and play for the big prize?
I love it. If I could just briefly reflect on my own experience in this regard, as you know, Eric, I was in higher ed for about 20 years. I learned a lot through the process, and I still value what higher ed brings, but I wasn't riding the horse in the direction I needed to ride. Yeah. Being part of a small nonprofit that is mission driven, that has a bottom line, full accountability, releasing an annual report every year. I'm riding the horse in the right direction now, and it's so energizing. So yeah. I totally concur with you, and I don't regret my years as a professor. In fact, again, so enriching in so many ways, but I never felt like I was riding the horse in the right direction. So I love it. Great.
People should reflect on it, because I think deep down inside, if you're riding the horse in the right direction.
Yeah, I love it. So we're going to pause here because Cookie and Cam have a question for you, Eric.
Okay, I'm ready.
So we're going to listen to them, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Light it up.
All right, so a question for today. If you had to teach a crash course on one must-have skill for today's job market, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'd probably have to say collaboration. I think that's something that is kind of applicable to the job market at any time, but especially now as there is this mix between being in person and hybrid, and working in teams is just something that's really important in any job that you have. So I feel like, especially with the job market being so competitive, a lot of people are skilled. And one of the things that can really make you stand out is how you work as a people person and how you work with others. So I'm curious to see what other people think about that as well.
Totally.
Okay. What class would you teach, Eric, if you had the chance right now?
So my favorite professor ever was a guy named Ruben Zubero, who taught Economics 101 for 55 years at the University of Colorado. And the thing that he did that was different than any teacher I've ever had is magical. So I won't even take this as my own genius idea, but I would take it and tweak it in a separate direction. He would, instead of teaching out of a textbook, he would bring in the Wall Street Journal, and he would just pick 1 or 2 or 3 articles out of the front page, and we'd talk about it. He'd say, you know what? There's a famine in Russia. What's going to happen to the price of red winter wheat in Iowa? And you'd have to figure stuff out. It made you realize that really everything you need to know is right in front of you in the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And what it takes is curiosity to synthesize what that all means. In my day job, I can't tell you how important it is to understand current events, to understand how to allocate, capital on behalf of clients in their investments. So it does matter who wins the election for president. It does matter whether or not we're going to have tariffs. It does matter if interest rates are going up or down. So it turns out knowing what's going on in the Wall Street Journal is helpful, but not sufficient. So the class I would teach, I would do it at the high school level, and I would teach financial literacy by way of the Wall Street Journal. So I would take important topics and I would bring it down to what is digestible for a high schooler. And I would start with things like, hey, do you own your own car right now? Yes, no. And if you do, Fantastic. If you do, did you buy it? Did you lease it? Did you pay it off? How's that work for you? Credit cards, do you have one? Are you running a balance on it? What interest rate are you paying? How are you thinking about an annuity? Like if you make $10,000 a year, could you put just 500 into an account every single year so that it compounds over a lifetime and you always take 5, 6, 8% of your income and sock it away? Are you doing that? Do you understand the power of that compound? All that kind of stuff. It's not taught. It's incredibly important. It is sadly the people that need the information the most don't get the information. And I think that class ought to be required core curriculum. And all you need is the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
That's brilliant. I love it. I have freshman in college, sophomore in high school. That freshman in college took economics at the undergrad level or at the high school level, and I can tell you, that high school needs you. He did not walk away pleased with what happened there. It was textbook. It was graphs. It was not applied.
Nope.
It was not connected to daily life, and I absolutely concur. Everybody needs to walk away with, what does this mean? What does money in my pocket mean? What does money in the bank mean? What does money in this account mean? If I pay this off.
You take something as simple as all these kids are in high school. They're going to make a big decision right then. Do they go to college or do they go somewhere else? They need to have a financial tool that helps them figure out, is college worth it? And what kind of college? Should I go to a private school? Should I rack up $300,000 of debt? How would I pay for that debt? Should I get a Pell Grant? Or should I go to a community college and learn the subject matter, but not go through the expensive program? Like those decisions, they require analysis. And unfortunately, our poor kids just get zero help in making those decisions.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love it. Eric, this has been an awesome discussion. You've given already so much advice, from tenacity, ride the horse in the direction it's going. That really goes to the gift, right? Connected to the gift.
Yeah.
Recognize your gift.
Yes.
And learning through failure, learning through success. You built a tremendous business, a tremendous life for yourself. If you had the last piece of advice, you've already given so much, but
I got a big one.
You want everybody to walk away from, what is it?
Between two stools, one sits on the floor. And what I mean by this is make a decision. When you get stuck with too much data, you're coming out of college, you don't know which way to look to, start for a career. At the end of the day, jump. Pick a direction and go hard. And if you don't, you can get sort of stuck in spinning around without a decision. And that's where you're sitting on the floor. And I've seen a fair number of people that came out of my daughter's class, my son's class out of college, that just kind of never launched because they sort of didn't know what they wanted to do. But instead of doing something, they kind of did nothing. And the nothing over a period of time builds into years of nothing. And then it gets pretty hard to do something. So my last piece of advice is, you're not going to need to worry about getting it perfect. Think of yourself as a pinball inside of a pinball game. You shoot one direction hard, strong, with vim and vigor. If it turns out it's the wrong direction, you're going to bounce off and you shoot a different direction, but do it with intentionality. Don't do it the way the pinball does in the game.
Yeah. I love it. I've learned so much from this. I know our audience is going to learn a lot. I really enjoyed this conversation. Of course, I really enjoyed our breakfast a month ago near your home. So thanks for taking the time. I'm so glad you got to Japan again recently.
No, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't been, go. It's pretty wild. They even have capybara cafes where you can go in and hang out and pet and hang out with capybaras, which I don't exactly know why capybaras became the thing, but they got them all over.
Capybaras?
Yeah.
Those are like down in Brazil.
Yeah.
What are they doing in Japan?
I can't even tell you. And there are all these cafes. I have no idea. And they're crowded. People want to go out and hang out with the capybaras. But my point is, you can learn a lot, travel the world, enjoy yourself. Good luck to everyone.
All right. Hey, Eric, thanks so much. Appreciate your time today.
You bet. You bet. Always. Take care.
This episode of As Unexpected is sponsored in part by Semester at Sea, a study abroad program where students visit 10 countries on 3 continents, all while taking 3 to 4 college classes through Colorado State University. See course offerings and upcoming voyage itineraries at www.semesteratsea.org. Thank you for joining this week's episode of the As Unexpected podcast. The viewpoints and opinions of featured guests do not necessarily represent those of the Institute for Shipboard Education or Semester at Sea. Hit the like button, share it with your colleagues, family, and friends, and remember, be curious, be compassionate, be courageous. That's what it takes to lead as unexpected.